The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Paranormal Concept right here on Parasearch UK Radio with your host, Paul Rook.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this new edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and on tonight's show, we are joined by Kerry Greenaway. Hello, Kerry.
Hello, lovey.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Have you recovered from the weekend? Because I heard you had a really hard weekend.
Hard, yeah. It was really difficult. It's the hardest weekend I've had in years. And ruined Mark, hashtag ruined Mark. It's going to be a hashtag from now on. Yeah, it was good.
Mark Manley came into your house and got severely drunk and passed out.
He did. Face palmed, sofa, all I'm saying. He's never going to live that down. I hope you all realise this. The guy will never live that down. I love it. It was the funniest. Yeah. Absolutely funniest. Brilliant.
Good. Yeah. So, what else have you been up to?
Not turning my phone off. So you're going to be hearing beeps and weird sounds all evening. I feel. But I don't even know where my phone is. It's all right. It's behind me. I can reach it. Bear with me. I'm just going to finish sharing it out on the socials. Generally, other than that, pretty damn good. Yesterday was, like when you crash and burn after a really good weekend. Yeah. Yeah, that was yesterday. I think everybody was feeling a bit like that yesterday, from said weekend, and but it was good. It was good. It was a good weekend and well needed, I feel, for a lot of people. So yeah, it was good. Yeah, absolutely. I went to a Game of Thrones convention. Well, I bet it was buzzing because it was the last ever Game of Thrones, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, it was Sunday, the convention, but the show was aired. The last episode was aired on Sunday, I think, Sunday night. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting, definitely. You had some of the stars there, and they were predicting who was going to get the throne. Yeah, so I'm not going to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen it yet, though. But yeah, it was definitely a good twist at the end.
Well, you know me, I didn't watch it, so
yeah, that's it. So you've got a lot to
But was the convention good? I mean, it was like a weekender, wasn't it?
It was just for Sunday, but they had jousting. They had the Wolves that done the UK promotion for Game of Thrones. They had those there, and some of them had little baby wolves with them. They were nice.
Baby wolves,
yeah.
Baby wolves.
They had people dressed up, obviously, as some of the characters. So there was a lot of Jon Snows walking about, and a lot of Daenerys Targaryens walking around.
Well, they are the main characters, right?
Yeah, but just everybody wanted to be them two, to be fair.
Wow. It's the best love story ever, right?
Well, I suppose, yeah. Although there was one that dressed up as one of the giants, and he had stilts as he was walking around. It was quite funny because the wolves wanted to eat the legs.
That conjures up a picture, everybody.
It does, absolutely. But it was a good weekend anyway. Absolutely. and it was good, quite nice to have a break doing something else other than the paranormal.
Yeah, but kind of like fantasy fiction instead.
Well, yeah, but it was still a totally nice, complete break from the paranormal into something else. And
I
then...
love that because it's amazing how often fantasy fiction crosses over into folklore and mythology, which is actually a huge part of the paranormal. So you kind of didn't leave the paranormal.
Doesn't it? I mean, even if you go to like the conventions for Tolkien or Lord of the Rings and things like that, you know, you've got elves and goblins and orcs and
exactly,
yeah, that's sort of paranormal stuff. But yeah, Game of Thrones. I suppose with the Nightwalkers, you've got
dragons, shapeshifters. I mean, Jesus Christ, you know, like rising from the dead. I mean, come on, there's like so much in there, and I haven't even watched it, and I know that.
Well, there was none of those there Saturday, Sunday, so.
Oh, yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah, but never mind. Anyway, tonight's show, we are going to be talking about Anastasia and Rasputin. Eventually.
Interesting topic. We're avoiding it like the plague because of the pronunciations.
So what I thought I'd do, because Kerry done most of the research for this afternoon, and what a wonderful job she's done. But I do think it's going to be quite amusing to listen to the translations of the words. So off you go, Kerry.
Oh my God! All right. Well, why? Firstly, I want to say really why we're talking about this. First of all, Anastasia, the story of the Tsar. We're going to go with Tsar, or is it Tzar? I don't know. But the Tsar of Russia is actually quite well documented, and it's quite a tragic story, really. But Anastasia after the events, which we'll cover, is I find it very tragic, and I find this kind of highlights human nature quite a lot of how people, you know, their mindset. They believe something so much that they believe that they're lost. You know, they didn't. I don't know. Is it greed? Is it belief in themselves? I don't know quite how you would explain it, but when we go further into the story, you'll understand, because a whole conspiracy has sort of built up around Anastasia, and not just Anastasia. Actually, there were other members of the Tsar family as well that people believe that they weren't killed, that they were actually like lived on, and you know that they were that person. And then you've got, in the midst of all of this story, you've got Rasputin, who was, you know, a really strange man that sort of was a peasant that rose to infamy, I think is the word, as a mystic and a seer in amongst all of this, and sort of the whole story is quite weird.
Bizarre.
Yeah, bizarre. That's kind of it. It's bizarre, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I first learned of the whole Anastasia thing. I mean, I remember doing the whole Russian Revolution stuff at school, but obviously that was a long time ago. But I've read a lot of stuff in the past about people that believe that they are Anastasia.
Yeah.
And you know, they even come out with sort of memories and other stories of what happened after Anastasia disappeared, and the royal family disappeared. So it's always been an interesting one as far as like people's memories go, and it's sort of interested. You know, it sparked my interest. But I mean, there are a lot of people out there that have claimed that they are Anastasia.
There are other members of the family as well that people have claimed to be, which we'll, as I say, we'll go on to. But let's have a quick look at the story behind this, really, because basically in Russia, Russia politics, crazy. right? So basically in Russia you've got a royal family, the Tsar family, and we get to a point in history where Tsar Nicholas II was the last sovereign, and there was a massive civil war, and basically he abdicated in the end. Now he had children, he had 4 or 5 children, can't remember now. We're worrying about one. There was loads of them. Right, there was quite a few children. But he ended up abdicating, and it caused a big thing. Now, when Anastasia was born, basically her name is, Anastasia Nikolaevna of Russia. Oh my God, I can do an amazing Russian accent when I'm drunk.
Awesome.
Who knew, right? Sorry, I'm not drunk. I'm not at all. Anyway, damn it. Now, when Anastasia was born, her parents and extended family were actually disappointed that she was a girl. They wanted another son who would be an heir apparent to the throne. Now, when she was born, he had to go and compose himself. He had to go for a walk. He was like, oh my God, it's another girl. Jesus. You know what I mean? He had to go for a walk.
I don't blame him. Girls are trouble.
Well, this one was. This one was. She was very lively as a child. She was very funny, very lively. She was very bright. She also had a bit of a spiteful side to her character. She was, out of all of the children, she's very outstanding as a personality. There's a lot of accounts of where Anastasia is highlighted because of her personality. And basically, she was named for... The name Anastasia is known as the breaker of chains. And because when she was born, her father actually pardoned and reinstated students who had been imprisoned for participating in riots in St. Petersburg and Moscow. You've got to remember this is a very volatile situation, political situation in Russia at that particular time. Now, Anastasia in Greek actually means resurrection. Now, this is key because of the belief that she didn't die, that she was actually... she escaped the massacre at the end. But that's quite key. Now, in Russia, it actually means grand princess or grand duchess. That's actually the Russian translation for that.
Okay.
Now, the general children of the Tsar family, they were raised very simply. They weren't raised in grandeur at all. They were raised very simply. They slept on hard cot beds without pillows. They took cold baths. They were expected to do chores like tidy their rooms, do needlework. Were very, charity orientated. So the work they did was, to sell stuff for charity and stuff like that. But all of the Tsar's children had bad health.
Yeah, I think bringing up children like that, it sort of makes them appreciative of the things they've got, as well as makes them a bit more humble, makes them better leaders, rulers.
And I think because of, I was going to say, you have to look at the whole political situation of Russia. He probably did the right thing there because of the hardships they then had to endure further on in their lives. It made them easier to endure those. But a lot of the children's health was very poor. Now, Anastasia herself actually had a weak muscle in her back, and she was actually prescribed a massage twice a week. But she was a bit of a bugger because she used to hide from this. And all the other girls, they would tend to bleed more than was normal. And this actually was attributed to being carriers of the haemophilia gene. Now, they didn't have haemophilia, not like Alexei, which was one of the son, but they had the gene. Now, we all know, what's haemophilia, Paul?
It's commonly known as the Royals disease, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it's basically your blood doesn't clot.
Yeah, the blood doesn't clot.
So you bleed out. And so it's very dangerous if you bruise yourself, or if you have an operation, or you cut yourself, you just don't clot. So the carriers of the gene, although they're not haemophiliacs, they have symptoms of haemophilia. So they have a lower than normal blood clotting factor. So, one of the, Maria, I think it was, had her tonsils out and she nearly died because the bleeding wouldn't stop. She did stop eventually and she was okay, but it was because she had this gene that prevented the blood clotting. And although she wasn't diagnosed with haemophilia, it was that. Now, Alexei, suffered, the son, this was, of the Tsar, actually had haemophilia B, which is a rare form of the disease, which basically he was incredibly ill with that. And it is actually a side of, it's called the royals disease because, you've got to remember the royals interbred with other royals and, keep the line pure and all that sort of stuff. And it was very apparent in the Russian royal line. And they reckon that his mother, Alexei's mother, this is, one of his sisters, now this could have been Maria or Anastasia, were carriers of the disease. So if Anastasia, had lived to have children, the chances are they would have been afflicted with haemophilia. So it would have carried on. It's a genealogy thing.
Yeah, it's hereditary.
That's right. Now, Alexei, I want to say Alexia. It's not. It's Alexei. His haemophilia was very chronic and incurable. Now, this becomes quite apparent later when we start talking about Rasputin. So this is why it's important to highlight this now. But at the moment, we're talking about Anastasia. So it's two different sort of subjects, but because it's intertwined, it gets a little confusing at times. But it actually, for Alexei, his haemophilia was actually very chronic, and it actually caused him permanent disability. Okay?
Okay.
So back to Alexia. No, not Alexia. Anastasia.
When you say Alexia, I just think of that little device from Apple or whatever it is. The one that knows everything.
Oh, no, we're talking about a little boy. We're talking about a little sickly child thing.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in World War I, to give you an idea of their background, Anastasia, along with her sister Maria, they were brought up to be very compassionate and empathic towards, their subjects. They visited wounded soldiers. They became Red Cross nurses. They had a very what I would class as quite normal, very humble, considering they were royalty. They were brought up to be very compassionate towards their subjects, I suppose you would call it, right?
Well, they would be brought up to be expected to carry on the royal line. They didn't obviously expect to be overthrown or whatever they were. They're sort of bringing them up to be humble and respectful and things like that. So that's
I actually think that plays very nicely into, as I say, what happened next. It served them well, rather than the privilege that they could have been brought up with. Now, basically, Anastasia, I'm going to keep saying Alexei, but it's Anastasia we're talking about. It's all the A names. I'm confused, right?
Yeah.
Anastasia herself, as I said earlier on, very bright, very bubbly, very, she had a high personality. She was very, very pretty little girl. And out of all of them, when you hear accounts of the family, she's the one that they kind of focus on because she's got this personality. She made people laugh, but she also had a bit of a spiteful nature too. She had that double side to her nature. Now, in 1917, in the February, her family and herself were placed under house arrest at the Alexander Palace in Zakoye Selo, and this was because of the Russian Revolution. Now, Nicholas II, her dad, abdicated on the 2nd of February in 1917, and as the Bolsheviks approached, Alexander Kerensky of the Provisional Government had them moved to Bolsk in Siberia. Okay, this is a house in Siberia that he moved them to. Now, bearing in mind, you've got to remember, if you're overthrowing a country, the sovereignty, you don't want the sovereignty in a position of power. You want to move them out. So you want them out of public eye. So you move them out to the country because you don't want the supporters of the royal family and the sovereignty to rise up in their name. So basically get them out of the public eye, move them out of the way, they become non a problem, and you can then take over control of Russia. Okay, so that's what that is. Now, basically, this captivity, which is basically what they were under, for the whole family, it was the whole family and their entourage, got put into this house. And they had, although it was a house, it was captivity, they actually at this point had quite a lot of freedom. They were allowed to play out in the gardens. They weren't allowed to travel or anything, but they could go to the local town, to the church. They could go out and play in the gardens. They had the house. It was run, very quietly. He had abdicated as well. So you've got to remember he'd given up his position. And a lot of the jewels and stuff that they had, they kind of like hid away and took with them.
Mm.
But it still took a toll on the family. They still kind of was like, there was an uncertainty to their future at this point. Okay. But because they were given this freedom, they lived quite humbly in this house. And it's one of those, isn't it? It's one of those situations where your future is uncertain, but you've still got quite a nice little life with your family. You're still with your family. You've still got,
it was almost,
a nice household.
It was almost like they just set them up to go on and live quietly in the country, and as long as they didn't make too much of a noise, they'd be quite happy to let them live out the rest of their life with that tiny bit of freedom.
Mm. Exactly. It felt very much like that at that time. Although I think the adults were a lot more aware of the political situation. And as we know, political situations are ever changing. And as I say, if you look into the Russian Civil War, it's incredibly murky and not very good at all, really. Now, the children at this time, people have commented and they saw them, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. There were times where they were laughing, they performed plays, and this is right through into the spring of 1918. And Anastasia is actually quite a big part of keeping the family's spirits up. She made them laugh and, they had tutors still. It was all kind of all right, It was all okay.
Yeah.
But in amongst all of this, you've got this Russian Civil War that's going on. So in 1918, what happened was the family... Now, bearing in mind, it happens quick. So, like in February, they seem to be all okay and happy and having plays and it's all okay and they've got this freedom and they can go to church. And then all of a sudden, the captivity was restricted even.
Mm-hmm.
And they seal the windows. They paint the windows and they restrict them to inside the house only.
Okay.
And there's an account where Anastasia tries to get some fresh air by opening the window and she actually gets shot at and it barely misses her by opening a window. That's how restrictive it was. Now, obviously, the impact of that on the family was very bad. It wasn't very good at all.
Wasn't it at this point they were rumoured to be that the family had all been murdered?
Not at this point. This is the point of restriction. Now, there were negotiations going on at this time for the release of them between the Bolsheviks and the extended family, like the royal houses of Europe. So we're at this point of the Civil War.
Right, okay.
So they restricted the Romanovs, as they were called, the Tsar family, into this house. But there are negotiations going on for their release. Even because he has abdicated. He's basically gone, have it. I don't freaking want it. Do you know what I mean? Just to save his family. But everything in a civil war, as you know, it's ever-changing. And it kind of didn't happen. And basically, all of a sudden, the family disappeared.
Okay.
Now, the most widely accepted account was that the family had been murdered, and it was actually investigated by a White Army investigator, Nicholas Sokolov, who came to the conclusion that the family had been killed by the Bolsheviks.
Okay, and didn't they say it was thrown down a mine shaft?
That's right. But that wasn't found until later. It was just at this time being investigated. Now, the Yurovsky... Oh, God.
Good luck with this.
Basically looked into this, and it, according to witness statements, post-event, and we're talking years post-event, we're talking like in 1989, the accounts of this was coming out, that the family, on the night of the deaths, the family was actually awakened and told to dress. They were told they were being moved to a new location to ensure their safety, because obviously the White Army at this time had reached Yekaterinburg, wherever that is. And then once dressed, the family and the small circle of servants were herded into a small room in the house's sub-basement and told to wait. Now, the two youngest, Alexandra and Alexei, were sat in chairs, and then guards entered the room, and then they were told they were to be executed. And they didn't have any time, and basically gunfire, and they killed them all.
Is this what the rumours were?
No, this is an account by witness statements, and that's been backed up by evidence from the actual bodies since they found the bodies. Spoiler alert, everybody, they found the bodies, right? And this has been backed up by DNA and forensics afterwards. Okay. Now, what had happened with a lot of the jewels, they'd sewn them into a lot of their corsets and their bodices, so some of the bullets hadn't hit, and so there were other atrocities, shall we say, to the bodies of the whole family and the retainers as well. It wasn't just the family as well. Now, obviously the Tsar was killed first, and then it went on to kill the entire family. The only person that survived this was a lady called Anna Demidova, who was Alexandra's maid. She survived the initial onslaught, but was then stabbed to death in the basement. So all of the retainers and the family were killed in the basement of the house.
Okay.
Now, it's when you think about that, that's horrible, isn't it? It's a political move.
Absolutely. Yeah. But, I mean, at the time, obviously, they wanted the family out of the way. So they done them in, basically. Got rid of them. They're definitely not going to come back.
No, because it was such a threat to the Russian political situation. And they didn't want an uprising against for the royal family now that the Bolsheviks had taken control. Now, Anastasia and Maria, her sister, were said to have crouched up against a wall, covered their heads in terror until they were shot down by bullets. Another guard told his wife that Anastasia had actually been finished off with bayonets, and the bodies were carried out. As the bodies were carried out, one or more of the girls cried out, and if they survived, because of the shots not hitting a point that would kill them, because of the jewels that were sewn into their bodies, that they were actually clubbed to death on the back of the head. Okay. Now, believe it or not, rumours of a possible escape about Anastasia were fuelled by the location of the the bodies of the family afterwards, and because of her name, meaning resurrection in Greece. So people are putting two and two together and coming up with four, because there are no bodies at this point to back it up. So this is like decades afterwards, because there are no bodies, because there's no proof to back this up at this point. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, there's a survivor. And the survivor, or the survivors, because they say there's various ones, kept coming forward over the years. Now, the most famous of these claimants was a woman who was called herself Anna Anderson. Now, she claimed to be the fourth and youngest daughter of the Romanov family, which is Anastasia, and I just don't get this. I just don't get it. It actually begins in 1920. Now, this lady, she tried to commit suicide and was actually sent to a mental health centre in Berlin. Now, she refused to tell anybody her name. One of the other patients in this mental health centre, this is where things get bizarre, right? Up to this point, you can go, oh, okay, it's not right, but I can understand the political situation. But then another patient in the mental health centre that this woman who tried to commit suicide said, oh, I think she's the Grand Duchess Anastasia. And then she kind of took this on and was started telling people that she was the Grand Duchess Anastasia.
I think the key thing here to remember is that they were in a mental health institution.
Clinic. I know, but this was taken so seriously. Okay. Now in 1928, Anastasia, air quote, moved to the United States and actually started sponging off Russian Princess Xenia Georgievna, however you say that name, and who was actually distantly related to the Romanov family. But because she couldn't prove her blue blood, Anastasia moved back to Germany. So people are... When you get to a point where you're starting to sponge off people that are relatives of this family, do you know what I mean? There must be some sort of relevance. There must be some sort of believability about this.
Yeah, I can't understand what. I mean, unless she sort of claimed that she was in the mental institution because of the whole incident and it traumatised her, maybe.
Well, if you're at the point where you're committing suicide...
Yeah.
You're not sound mentally, are you?
No.
There are issues there.
They must have had, like, pictures of her and stuff to be able to
The trouble
compare.
is, when Anastasia was killed, at that point where allegedly she was killed, she was very young. So, and the photographs aren't that great and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this Anastasia... struggled for 20 years. She struggled to get her name recognised by the European courts. It's worth remembering the Romanov family had a huge amount of wealth in bank accounts. Now, because there was no living survivors, they couldn't draw on that. So if you can prove you're a member of the Tsar's family, you've got access to this wealth.
Nice.
I know, right?
That's probably why there's so many people coming forward to claim it.
And at the time, we didn't have DNA testing, and we didn't have any bodies at that time to do a test against. We had relatives, but we didn't have. So you've got to remember, technology has moved on a lot further. So in 1968, this Anastasia moved back to the United States. Where she married a wealthy man and actually got American citizenship. Now, her actual name was Eugenia Drabek Smetiskov. Smetisko.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd do.
We'll go with that, right?
Yeah, we'll go with that. There's no V on the end, so yeah, we'll go with that.
We'll go with that. Right. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I've got confused. This is a different one. This is another one. Right. This is different from Anna Anderson. This is somebody different. So that was her, but she never managed to prove it, basically. And she married someone wealthy and kind of forgot it anyway. Which, if you marry someone wealthy, you don't really want the money that's in the bank accounts. So anyway, we've got another one, Eugenia Smith, which is Eugenia Drabek Smetisko, who was an artist and a writer of Ukrainian descent who emigrated to the United States in 1929 from Bukovina. Jesus Christ, why are you letting me do all these names?
Because you was the one that done the research.
All right, okay. Now, Smith rocked up in Chicago. Oh, I did. I know, I should have highlighted different sections, is all I can say. Smith rocked up in Chicago.
Maybe you could have put in the English versions of the names.
Maybe, right? Now, she rocked up in Chicago in 1963, presented a book to a publisher in the Windy City, where she said that she was the Grand Duchess herself. Now, the publisher was a little bit like, oh, really? And told her to take a lie detector test. She failed. So she said she was Anastasia's mum.
Right.
She changed her statement, said that she was the Grand Duchess Anastasia instead, and passed the test.
See, I mean, the lie detector tests are not that, as long as you believe what you're saying, they can be misguiding.
Considering this is 1963.
Yeah.
As well. So the technology, again, you've got to look at the technology at the time. Her autobiography, she actually wrote an autobiography of H.I.H. Anastasia Nikolaevna of Russia, and recounts her life of the Imperial family and how she escaped the execution by the Bolsheviks. She actually writes a book about this, old Smith does.
Yeah, okay, I can...
Never proves that she is. Complete work of fiction. Right? She died in 1997 in Rhode Island. Never proved that she was Anastasia. Now, Marga Boots, another one, is considered to be one, if not the most successful, of the aspirants to the Romanov family. But she claimed to be Olga, who was the first daughter of Tsar Nicholas II. She first appeared in France in the wake of World War II. Now, she collected money from the public for the Grand Duchess and claimed she escaped execution of the Romanov family. But later on, she was arrested for fraud. And she argued that she was a Polish, whatever that word is, szlachta, which is actually a legally privileged noble class.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, I know, right? Everybody knows that, right? Some years later, in the 1950s, she appears again, Marga appears again, and denied any knowledge of her previous fraudulent activities, but managed to convince Nicholas, the hereditary Grand Duke of Oldenburg, and Wilhelm, the German Crown Prince, that she was part of the Romanov family, that she was Olga. They supported her...
I mean, if she believed 100% that that's who she was, then she's gonna be like not only just convincing herself but convincing other people as well.
Well, she was that convincing. She's convincing other members of the royal family because they supported her financially until their death. That's the weird part about this. It's like these people are getting access to royal families and people are believing it. Now, in amongst all this, she wasn't really in the public eye, so she kind of kept out of the public eye. Yet when this Anna Anderson, the first one we talked about, became famous for her claims to be Anastasia, bots did everything in her power to destroy Anderson's credibility and wrote a book, there's a theme here, folks, to tell her story of her family. But this wasn't published. Now, she died in 1976 in Sala Comacchina in Italy. But she actually refused to be actually particularly public about her claims. But probably because she'd already been done for fraud, right?
Yeah, I'd think I'd go with that.
Okay. Now, another one. We've got another one. But this is... this one is a man, Michael Goleniuski. Now, he was a Polish officer and counterintelligence agent who cooperated with the Soviet KGB during the late 50s whilst employed by his, country's secret service. Now, oh God, I'm just going to call him Michael. I'm not going to go with the second name. Should we go with Michael?
Just go with Michael. Michael G.
Michael G, yeah. Or should we go Mickey G?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay, we're going with Michael G. Became a triple agent by providing the CIA with Polish and Soviet secrets. Now, in 1961, he defected to the United States and officially started working for the CIA. The same year, a Polish court declared him dead, basically because he wasn't there. He actually claimed to be the Tsarevich Alexia, the young kid that had this haemophilia
disorder. Yeah.
Now, this was the only son of Tsar Nicholas II. Now, according to Mickey G's family, he said the whole family was alive. It weren't just him. No. It weren't just like the youngest son's alive. He reckoned all of them were alive. But very few people believed him. Now, to prove it, he tried to find his sisters, and he actually had a reunion with Eugenia Smith, claiming to be his sister. God, it's just honest to God. I mean, it's just amazing, isn't it, when you think about it?
It's reunion of the
fraudsters, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall at that meeting.
That would have been funny.
Now, he claimed that was his sister, and Eugenia Smith said that was her brother.
Mm-hmm.
However, Mickey G documents, go with Mickey G, showed that he was born in Poland 18 years after Alexia was born. Now, in response, Mickey G claimed that he was a haemophiliac, which made him look younger than he really was. But again, few believed him. And actually, the CIA fired him because of his lies.
Okay.
Now, he fought to regain his rightful name. God, when you think of the money that this involves, I think this shows like human greed. Okay. He actually...
Yeah, I think that along with the whole... at the time, it was like the mystery of what happened to the royal family. Mm-hmm. And people just wanted to jump on that bandwagon, get their 15 minutes of fame sort of thing. And
mm-hmm.
I think that inspired people to do this.
Oh, totally. It's totally greed driven. The money that's that's sitting in his bank accounts from the Romanov family, it's crazy. Now, he actually fought for his rightful name until his death in 1993. But again, he didn't have any luck. And we have another one.
There seems to be quite a few of them, doesn't there, really?
Oh, it's amazing what people do for money, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've only got like 15 minutes left of the show,
oh my God,
should we just skip to Rasputin?
Oh, all right. Well, basically, there's another one, basically, and she wasn't proved either.
Okay.
And she died in 1970, and by now DNA testing was in. Now, basically, hang on, there's quite a few. Bear with me. I'm going to just scroll down.
Okay.
Right. Anyway. In 1991, they found an abandoned mine which served as a mass grave near the house where the Romanov family were contained, which was in Yekaterinburg. And they found the acidified remains of the Tsar, his wife, 3 of their daughters. Okay, and the bodies of Alexia and Anastasia, or Maria, they're not sure which sister it was, were discovered in 2007. So they then could DNA test against all these people that said that they were...
So does that still make one of them missing then?
No. All of the bodies
were
so found. All accounted for.
Right.
All scientific analysis has been done. DNA testing has been done. DNA testing has been done on all the people that said they were related, even though they've all died. The DNA testing has been done. It has been conclusively proved that everybody of the imperial family were killed at that time. So no survivors. So anybody coming forward saying they are Anastasia or any other member of the family are fraudsters, they are not. So this case has been put to rest once and for all.
To rest. Yeah.
Right, Rasputin, go.
What a weirdo, quite frankly. He was basically born into a Siberian peasant family in 1869. I don't know what his name was. Do you want to just like read out his name for me?
Grigory Yafimovich Rasputin.
Yep, that's the one. He didn't get a very good schooling, and he never learned to read or write, apparently. Mm-hmm. Some of the villagers believed that he possessed supernatural powers. So I'm wondering if he was like a medium or something, maybe. While others cite examples of extreme cruelty for a time, and it's believed that his name Rasputin means what does it mean?
Licentious.
Yep. And historians now believe that Rasputin meant where two rivers meet, a phrase that describes an area near where he was born in Siberia. Mm-hmm. Rasputin, he entered a monastery in Russia with the intention of becoming a monk. And, he wasn't there for very long, though. No. They think he left to get married at the age of 19. According to the history books, he had 3 children, but two died shortly after being born. And
I'd just like to point out, Paul is skipping names here. Carry on.
Don't tell everybody. Rasputin left his family and travelled to Greece, and he travelled to Greece and the Middle East, making several pilgrimages to the Holy Land in 1903. Basically, he was having a bit of a wander around, getting a bit of culture, and after a few years, he was introduced to the Russian Tsar Nicholas II and his wife, and they were seeking help for their sickly son because they believed that he had healing powers, and obviously they were trying to heal the haemophiliac child, whichever one that was.
Alexia, the youngest son, had haemophilia, and because of because of his alleged healing powers, they kind of like bought into that he's a freaking healer, right? And brought him into the fold, as it were, to try and heal.
Yeah, but I don't think it worked very well. But between 1906 and 1914, various politicians and journalists used Rasputin's association with the imperial family to undermine the dynasty credibility and push them for reform. Rasputin helped their efforts by claiming to be Tsar Anna's advisor, and accounts of the I'm lost where I am now.
He was a bit rampant. We'll go with that. He had a reputation, didn't he, old Rasputin?
Apparently so. Yeah, I never knew the geezer personally, but hey. But yeah, it was put into the press and stuff like that. That it was very rampant. And in truth, however, Rasputin's influence at the time was limited to the health of Alexis. So as Russia entered World War I, Rasputin predicted that calamity would befall the country. Nicholas II took command of the Russian army in 1915, and Alexandra took responsibility for domestic policy, and it literally all fell to bits.
Basically.
So it all fell to bits. And on the night of December 29th, 1916, a group of conspirators, including the Tsar's first cousin, the Grand Duke of Pavlovich, and one of the other princes.
Prince Felix Yusupov.
That's the one. I Yeah, I know I'd get there in the end. Basically, fed him wine and cakes laced with cyanide, though Rasputin eventually became rather drunk, as the poison didn't have any effect. Baffled but not deterred, the conspirators finally shot Rasputin multiple times, and then wrapped him up in a carpet and threw him into the Neva River, where it was discovered 3 days later, but the body of Rasputin was gone. The last of his prophecies were yet to unfold. Shortly before his death, he wrote to Nicholas to predict that he would, if he was killed by government officials, the entire imperial family would be killed by the Russian people. And obviously his prophecy came true 15 months later, when the Tsar and his wife and all the children were murdered by assassins amidst the Russian Revolution. So there you go. That's sort of the weirdness that surrounded him.
I have
Superman.
to say, if you look at photographs of Rasputin, he is a weird character. His eyes are freaky. You know what he reminds me of when I look at photographs of Rasputin?
Go on.
It reminds me of Aleister Crowley.
Okay.
It's that same. I don't know. Look. He's very weird. He is a very weird character, is old Rasputin. And how he rose from being such a peasant to being so integral into the Russian royal family, into the imperial family, is actually quite astounding, really. And I kind of understand it. You've got a sick child. You want to kind of do everything you can for that child. But, to rely on a mystical seer and healer when he entered St. Petersburg, it's like, all of a sudden he becomes such an integral part of the Russian royal family. It's
when you're ill, when you're ill or in pain or anything, you're willing to give anything a go. I remember when I had back pain, and I went to medium night, and the medium was like, "Oh, you got back pain, ain't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." She said, "Have you ever had healing?" And I was like, "Nope." She said, "Do you want to give some a go?" And I was like, "You go on then, knock yourself out, give it a go." Didn't do anything, but she gave it a go anyway. So I'm not too big on the whole faith healing stuff anyway.
You have to believe.
Yeah.
And you don't.
No, I'm very scientific when it comes to healing. But that's more to do with training than anything.
But Alexander, the mum, accredited a lot of the reasons why Alexa, survived certain conditions throughout his young life on this Rasputin. So you can, the first time, so she accredits him as saving him on numerous occasions, and actually became a really close friend to the whole family, not just not just the mum and the dad, as it were. He became a very integral part, to the point. Now this is where I find it all gets a little bit weird, right? He not only would he be privy to a lot of confidences, he would be escorted to the nursery, to the children at night while they were wearing like their nightgowns and stuff like that. And one of the nurses actually called it out and said they didn't think it was actually right, but there was a really close relationship between all the members of the family and Rasputin. And yes, there was rumours in the press about his
conduct.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. I was sort of searching for a decent word there. I love conduct. Yeah, about his conduct. Actually, not about the children per se, but there was one of the nurses that he was alleged to have raped. He was also said to have had a sexual relationship with Alexander, the mum, as well, in this time. And I think what it is, I think it's a political move to discredit this weird monk seer kind of person. Yeah. And because of his behaviour, although it may have been completely innocent, not necessarily. Do you know what I mean? Because why would I don't know. I think it's all a little weird. But there's no doubt.
It's almost like the press were trying to convince everybody that he was an evil man,
an evil or a bad influence on the royal family. And also, you've got to remember that would then discredit the royal family or the imperial family, as it's known.
And they were trying to get rid of them anyway, so as one stone.
Yeah, I mean, when he was accused of rape, and actually he was accused of rape for one of the royal governesses, the Empress actually refused to believe it and said that everything Rasputin does is holy. I mean, their complete belief system in this guy, you know, they couldn't believe any wrongdoing by Rasputin at all. One thing I think that shows is you see characters in history that have such charisma and people blind belief in these people. I don't understand it. You see it with cult leaders in a funny kind of way. You see it with characters like Hitler. You know what I mean? Where people like believe so much in that person and what they're saying. And what is it about that person? And I think Rasputin was one of these kind of people, to have the whole family. Because when he died, everybody in the family was absolutely devastated that he died.
Yeah.
You know, the children, the family, they were absolutely devastated, which I find he's not, do you know what I mean? It's like, why would that be such a loss to the family under the political situation?
They were so close. Yeah, I think because they were so close that it was more like a member of the family being killed. So that's sort of why they were probably upset that much.
But I do think you have to look at the political circumstances. It's a very uncertain future for them as well. This must have been an undermining of, God, if they can take Rasputin away from us, what else can they take away from us kind of scenario. But there is no doubt that his conduct, whilst he was with the family, was actually quite, should we say, questionable. Questionable.
Yeah, indeed.
He seemed to have some kind of power, and the Tsar's family believed in him totally in regard to his healing powers and his seer powers. And he's quite a weird character. But how? Look, you know, he's cyanide poisoning, and then they had to shoot him.
That's it, and then eventually wrapped him up in a carpet and threw him in the river.
So just to make sure that if they hadn't quite killed him, then he was going to drown, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, the cyanide worked, so there was no guarantee the shooting would.
I'd like to know how he survived from cyanide poisoning, unless the quantities of what they put in the cakes wasn't as strong as they thought, perhaps. But I don't know. Cyanide was very toxic. Who knows, right?
It is. Then I suppose it depends on maybe because of his. I don't know particularly, but I would have thought that going back to that period, I know a lot of people used to eat poppy seeds, and they contain a small amount of cyanide in them because that's where they get cyanide from. So maybe if he used to eat food with cyanide in it, his body was used to the cyanide.
Like
so it might have given him
tolerance.
Yeah. Huh. So maybe that sort of explains it a little bit.
Possibly.
That's what
Who knows, right?
But on that note, we've come to the end of the show.
Yes, we have.
So, Kerry, what is coming up for the rest of the week?
Okay, so on Wednesday evening on Haunted Histories, tomorrow, 9 p.m, Penny is in the studio. She is returning to Newstead Abbey with the lovely Barry John. Then on Thursday on PSH Radio, the guys have got Danielle Sheehan from the Paranormal and UFO convention that's going on in Wales. Then on Friday, we are talking all things conspiracy with the moon landings. Did we land on the moon? What do you think?
Yeah, of course we did. Well, we didn't, but the Americans might have.
Well, obviously the Americans may or may not have. We will be looking into the moon landing conspiracy on Friday on the Dark Mirror Show.
Excellent, and I can't wait for the after-show party that night either.
Oh my God.
Where we'll be talking about all things unconscious. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining me in the chat room tonight, or joining us in the chat room tonight. Absolutely pleasure. And thank you, Kerry, for joining me once again and doing all that marvellous research for me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah. As for next week, I'm not sure what we're doing, so
well, we
it'll
have
be a
got
complete
Sam
surprise.
Bennett. No, we have got Sam Bennett's joining us next week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've got Sam Bennett's joining us next week on the Paranormal Concept Show to talk all about her paranormal and mediumship journey.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've got that one planned then. Awesome. Just no one's raised it yet. I don't know. Slap your wrist.
Only got raised at about 6 o'clock today.
Plenty of time to get it up. Anyway,
shut up.
Thank you, and good night from me.
And it's good night from me.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.